All right. It says we're live. Welcome to another live stream. Doing something different tonight. I'm going to talk to Gaterooze. Some of you might know him from the Intellivision Amico sphere, but Gaterooze is a developer of games. He's created some games, and of course, he did the Intellivision Amico hater game. So we're going to talk about his background. We're going to talk about some of the games that you can get on Steam and Nintendo Switch that he's working on. What it's like to be a developer. You know, how much money do you actually make in this stuff? And we're going to talk about his history making the Intellivision Amico hater games and his thoughts on that as well. Welcome, Gatoroos. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, and hi to everybody.
Yep. So here we are. Let me go in your background. So what's your background in gaming? Like, did you grow up with video games? Did you have a favorite system? Did you have like a favorite game?
Yeah, well, it started very early. I must have been 3 or so, and we got a Pong machine. Um,
Like one,
I
one
don't
of the
know
ones
if
that plug into your TV, like a dedicated, like it's basically an
exactly,
early
yeah.
plug and play. Okay.
Yeah, and that's all it played. It had a couple of game modes, like they call it tennis, but it was exactly the same. It was just the scoring was different. Um, so yeah, we started with that, and then for Christmas a year or two later, we got an Atari 2600.
Now
And
you're in Australia, right?
yeah,
And did you grow up in Australia then?
yep, born and raised in Australia.
Okay, so gaming was because here's the thing, like so many of my listeners were like landlocked into America, right? We grew up with America, the American gaming. We talk about the great video game crash. A lot of people around the world are like,
Mm.
"What crash?" You know, like it didn't
Yeah.
happen here because Atari was an American company. And by the way, hello Nick, hello Waddle, hello Derp. Welcome to the chat and the stream. And maybe at the end we'll take some questions of people if people have them as well. But so you had the Pong machine, the dedicated Pong. Then you had an Atari 2600. And any favorite games or memories with the 2600?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was magical. I was absolutely addicted to that. And we only had a few games like the combat adventure, the basics, but I loved all of them. And then the local video store started getting games as rentals. So every couple of weeks, we, for the weekend, get a game out. And so we played stuff like Kaboom and Barnstorming. And yeah, it was a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I just got
My,
done playing Barnstorming. That was a pretty good
yeah,
one. Like, but that's weird to me because I know some people they rented Atari 2600 games. That blows my mind because that was like to me it was like pre like Blockbuster, right? Like it's like
right.
wow, like NES games being rented totally normal to me. It's weird that like yeah, you could rent a 2600 game, but you know they were expensive back then, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and it was a lifeline for us because I grew up on a farm and we
Oh,
had nothing. There were no electronic stores. The nearest electronic store was over an hour's drive away. So it was not easy to do that. So when the video store, that was only a 15, 20-minute drive away. That was a godsend.
so because you were in Australia, and maybe you don't know because you know you weren't aware of like economics or whatever, but do you know did like Atari 2600 games cost a lot more than it would for an American citizen?
Absolutely. I mean, I was a kid, so I didn't really notice the price tag, but I'm aware that as I grew up, games were incredibly more expensive, at least double. So if you had a game that was 50 US, it would be 100 Australian dollars. Now, our exchange rate fluctuates between sometimes it's a parity, sometimes it's like, it's about 1.4 times at the moment. But then on top of that, you had all the shipping costs and distribution costs to get down here. And so they basically were lazy and just doubled the price.
Right. And so you had the PAL system then, is that correct
Yep,
in Australia?
that's
So you
right.
had so you would have some games like that we didn't get over here in the States, and there's some games in the States that you didn't get there. I know
Yeah.
there was like a late golf game that's supposed to be really good. It's like called My Golf or something like that. HES, is that a company that rings a bell to you?
Yeah, we got the Hess games on Nintendo as well. Not as much. See, we were more aligned with the UK market. So we would get more UK stuff than US.
Okay.
Even like on Commodore 64, amazingly, you may not know this, but several games were completely different games, like programmed from scratch, different between the US and the UK release. So, like the conversion of Afterburner, for example, from the arcade, the UK and US version were 100% different games, and that happened for several arcade conversions.
Yeah,
So
I
we
think
would
I
get the
heard about
UK
that. Yeah.
version.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's
I heard
madness.
about that. Did
And
you
some of them were terrible on one and excellent on the other. So it was a real crapshoot.
did you get a Commodore 64 or did you graduate after the 2600 to something else?
Yeah, that was my next gaming foray. It was Commodore 64. It was actually a teacher, my third grade teacher, sold it to us.
Wow.
Sold us his, and that was amazing. It's still my favorite gaming system today. Commodore 64. I just fell in love with that and never lost it.
And did you like when did you start programming games or messing around with programming? Did you do that on the C64? Was it when you were older?
On the 664, I didn't get much past, the Hello World. In fact, literally no further than the Hello World. So, 10 print hello, 20 go to 10.
Yes.
And that was it. I didn't actually start learning programming until I was over 40 years old. So
Wow.
I'm a bit of an anomaly, I
Okay,
think.
okay. So that because that was one of my questions. That so programming is that like did you like after high school did you do any training with computers or anything, getting further education with computers, or is it
No,
just
not
something
at
you
all.
picked up?
I did a finance degree. There was Info 101 for, basic IT stuff, but I did a lot of computer stuff just as a hobby, putting together old PCs and things like that. But nothing in the realm of programming at all.
All right. And so what were some of your like your favorite games or most impressionable games growing up that just kind of really affected you or really, like, yeah, these are the games that are probably the most important to me.
Yeah. Well, on the Commodore 64, the ones that really stuck with me were Paradroid. It's kind of a dungeon crawler, but on a spaceship. But you controlled this little, it's called an influence device. It was a robot, and you would attach yourself to other robots and take them over and become them, essentially. So you could either shoot the bad guys or possess them. And then you became that bad guy, and you could use their weapons and so on. And it was just amazing game design. So that stuck with me forever. And Whizball was another one. You this crazy floating ball, and you shoot drops of paint, and you have to pick up the drops of paint to fill cauldrons. It's totally bizarre, but it works. It's unique to this day. So those really stuck with me. And then my next big thing was SNES, the Super Nintendo.
Uh-huh.
I was absolutely mad for that. I mean, I went through NES, SMS, Genesis, etc. But SNES was the one that really captured me, and there my favorite game was Zelda 3.
Mm.
That it's possibly my favorite game of all time. It's just perfect. Every single thing about it, I could not improve. It's
Did you
incredible.
play the first Zelda before that?
Yeah, I'd played the original Zelda. At the time, I was probably, I don't know, I was quite young and it was a little hard for me. So I never got into it that much. I got into it in later years and went back and beat it. And Zelda 2, I never actually played. But 3, and then the next few, like all the Game Boy Advance ones and Game Boy ones I played through.
So let me ask you this. Gateroos. Where does the name Gateroos come from?
So Gaterooz is actually my wife and I's creative partnership. It's not actually a single person. It's me and her. She doesn't develop the games, but we started this actually before we were married. We were writing partners. This is 20 odd years ago. We've been married 21 years. And when we first got together, just as writing partners, she was living in Florida and I was in Australia. And I was traveling over there, but we eventually moved back here. Anyway, so Gator was Florida Gators and the
Ah.
Roos is kangaroos.
Oh. See, because I
Yeah,
always thought of it like, okay, so she's a gator and you're ooze. So
yeah,
so ruse, so kangaroos. That's cute. I
yeah,
like that. That's nice. So is she American then originally?
yeah. She's a New Yorker native, and then she moved down to Florida a bit after that.
And how did you guys end up meeting then? if you don't mind me asking.
There was a what do you call it? A screenwriters workshop run by Francis Ford Coppola, and we met in that.
Wow.
And then we just clicked on a writing level, and we started collaborating on screenplays, and then we formed this partnership, and then we eventually got married.
So if I'm going in too far, you just let me know. But did you actually get any? You talked about writing screenplays. Did you write any scripts for anything, TV, movies, anything like that?
Nothing hit the big screen. We had some shorts in festivals and things, but we made a living of it. So we had a Hollywood agent, and we were hired to write screenplays. We were hired to adapt books into screenplays, things like that. But we're always on that cusp of getting greenlit, onto the screen. Like, for example, we had a script that we wrote on spec, and then it was optioned by a studio to become the sequel to the SWAT movie, if you remember that.
Okay,
It was
yeah,
a movie
vaguely, yeah.
based on the old TV show, SWAT. And our script had nothing to do with it, but they thought they could turn it into a sequel to SWAT, so they optioned it.
Well,
But
obviously they've done that in games, right? Because like
yeah,
Solaris was like supposed to be the last Starfighter, but
right.
originally, but then it they lost the license. But then Star Raiders 2 on the Atari 8-bits was originally I think that was going to be like a last Starfighter game. Like, hey, let's make this Star Raiders 2. Let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of backwards there, but
It
yeah.
happens a lot in the film industry. The guarantee there are several films you've seen that started completely differently.
Yeah.
One example was there was a movie with Whoopi Goldberg in it. It was written as a white guy was her character. It was totally different, and but Whoopi got attached to it, and so they rewrote the entire thing based around her. It's
Yeah.
such a weird thing. You get producers, and we've had it a number of times where a producer come and say, "We love your script. We're buying it, but we just want this one little thing changed." And when they go to explain it, it changes the entire movie, and you wonder, why did you like this movie in the first place?
Yeah, it's like they get the script for Aliens and like, what if we turn the alien into a porpoise? A
Yeah,
dolphin,
exactly.
like everything else is the same. But
Yeah.
let's do that. That yeah, what's the biggest movie or TV show, if you're allowed to say, that you worked on in some form or fashion or came close to, other than the SWAT thing?
The next closest was we had a script. It was a horror script, and it was kind of this hot property for a little while. There were a few studios interested. It got optioned by geez, I'm blanking on the name. Alcon. They made tons of big movies now. They did like that Will Smith zombie one, Iron Legend. They no,
Okay.
sorry, Book of Eli. That's the one they
Book
did
of
with
Eli. Okay, yeah.
Smith, and heaps of stuff. Do Where's My Car, Insomnia with Robert De Niro, and heaps lately. Anyhow, the deal was all done. It was going into pre-production. They'd optioned it, but then so what they do, they pay you a little bit of money and lock up the script for a couple of years, and then when they're ready to go, they pay you the rest of the money, and then they own it. So our lawyers had negotiated the deal. It was all set. It was going to be signed within a few days, and then they had a movie came out that absolutely bombed. Now, it was the second bomb in a row. They had Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and that bombed.
Yes.
And then they released Racing Stripes, that stupid little zebra. Actually, I like the movie. The zebra, animated zebra thing. And that bombed. They thought it was going to do Toy Story money, and it did, 20 million or something. It was terrible. So then the owners of the company, who were actually Fred Smith, who owned FedEx, said, right, that's it. We're going to teach you a lesson. And they like halved the budget for the studio, and they had to cancel like half of their projects. And of course, ours was on the chopping block like 2 days before it got signed.
Oh.
And it was terrible
Oh.
because we had done heaps of free work for them as well. With another example that when they loved the script, but can you just change this? And so we were doing some rewrites for them. And yeah, that was a crushing blow.
I'm sorry, man, that's tough.
Yeah.
But you seem to have bounced back. Okay. So now here, how'd you get into programming games? What like inspired you to actually like, hey, I'm actually beyond go to 10, print, hello or whatever.
Yeah.
How did you get to like, hey, I'm gonna program games? Like, what did you have to do? How did you learn?
Yeah. Well, it's a little roundabout story. If I go too far in one direction, let me know. But actually, after that travesty I just described, we had a chance meeting with a person who hired us to write a game design document. And it was, mid 2000s. And we went all out on this thing. It was a couple of 100 pages. We designed every aspect of the game, all the UIs, the gameplay, every weapon, every level in the game. And the game design was acquired by a studio, and it actually got made. It was a physical Xbox 360 game, and PC physical game. Now, I won't say the name because it's kind of mediocre. It'll dox me.
Okay, gotcha.
It's got like a 60% average on Metacritic, but that was our first exposure to the game industry, and the studio kept us around. We got to play the betas as they came in and so on. But the main reason I don't like being associated is because we're credited as writers on the story, on the game. I've got a design credit as well, but that's separate to the writing. We didn't write a single word that ended up in the game. They very quickly had an issue because our protagonist was female. They said none of our players are female, and none of the men want to play as a woman. So,
okay.
Not really
But by this time, Tomb Raider had already been out, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because that was the previous generation. So,
exactly.
Okay, go on.
They were completely backwards. But we thought, all right, fine, it's your game now. But then they came and said, the story, because our story was fairly nuanced. It was, you were invading this planet. You thought you were the good guys, but really you weren't. It was kind of an Iraq allegory, where they're not seeing you as liberators, they're seeing you as invaders. And the people you're fighting against see themselves as freedom fighters, as defending their homeland.
Right.
And that all came out through the story. No, that was too complex for them.
So they went back to you're the vanilla good guy getting the bad guys, right?
Oh boy. Their idea was they came and said, what if the bad guy was a mad scientist who wanted to release a poison cloud bomb on everybody on the planet?
Never heard that one before.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like you're watching an episode of Get Smart or something. It was crazy. So
Get Smart, by the way, underrated show for those who have never seen it. Very, very well done.
I mean, it's campy, but it's fun. It's meant to be that way.
Yes.
Whereas this game was not. And so anyway, we stepped back. We said, look, it's your game now. Just take our name off the writing credits and do whatever you want. But they left our name on there.
I wonder, do you think there's some legal ramifications where if they took your name off, you could say like that was my game, even though they changed it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So inherent in creators is a thing called moral rights. And that's the legal right to be identified as a creator of that work. And so whenever you do work for hire, you typically have to waive those moral rights. So that if you sign that waiver, they never have to mention you with the game again. And in fact, you can't. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because that's a bummer that they did that, but it just seems like so that might leave a little bad taste in your mouth. But now you got like the game creating bug a little bit.
Well, so between that and when I started programming, I took a left turn and co-founded a startup, basically a game studio. But we were making games for the military. So it's a really weird situation.
But now are these games for training or are they for entertainment?
For training, yeah. Okay. Yeah, training games. Not just the military, also like rescue organizations and firefighters, ambulance, all this kind of thing.
Which, by the way, is totally like, I mean, there's historic precedence for that, right? Because Battlezone was like a military kind of training tool at some point. Atari made one for the military. I mean, when I learned driver's ed, they had like a simulator that you use. So simulators are becoming more and more popular. So Yeah, it's totally a norm, but it is cool that, you know, you can learn with video games.
Yeah, and like this was in the early days of VR. We actually, well, another company I co-founded made our own VR headsets. This is before Oculus.
Wow.
And even after, we made far superior, even AR we got into eventually, way better than anything on the market. But they're $50,000 per unit. So, you know,
Yeah, they
the
better
typical
be. Yeah, I
person's not
mean,
going to get them. But that's how I have some kind of background when I talk about Amico stuff. You know, I've done this stuff. I've made electronics and shipped them and things like that. But anyhow, we ran this studio as a AAA game studio. I went and poached because I had no experience doing any of this, right? And I, unlike Tommy, I didn't pretend I did. So I had to find really strong seniors to carry me. So I poached people from Borderlands, Call of Duty, The Sims Online, BioShock, all these AAA developers. I got the lead AI engineer from the Assassin's Creed series. Yeah, he'd done the first 4 or 5 games. Incredible, absolutely incredible team.
with
But
over
I was,
600 years experience by any
oh
chance?
yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and that the mistakes that Miko have made, I tell you.
We'll get into
We'll
that
get into that. Yeah.
at the end. I know that's what everyone's waiting for, and I'm sorry about that if you're waiting for this, because I'm enjoying the background of your story, because like I was talking to you offline. It's like I don't know a lot of people can say like, yeah, I made a game. It's on the Switch. It's on on Steam, and it's interesting. Like you didn't go to college for this stuff, you know,
No.
but here you are. You got a game on Steam and Switch. Um, so when did you decide to start making your own like personal games? Like just like
Mm.
because is this pretty much a you thing? These games?
Yeah, I mean, Ampersat is 100% every single thing in it, from the music to the artwork, sound effects. I did everything from scratch. My next game, no, I'll tell you more about that.
Okay.
Um, but basically, that experience where I was telling all these AAA developers what to do, I had this kind of imposter syndrome because I'd never done it before myself, and they were great about it. Like it was fantastic camaraderie there. Um, but after I left that phase of my life behind, I thought, you know what? I'm going to walk a mile in their shoes. I want to try all of those elements myself and see how hard it was, the crazy things I was asking them to do, get some
Hmm.
perspective on how rough I was on them, and just see what I enjoyed. You know, would I enjoy programming? Would I enjoy modeling? Would I enjoy making music, etc., etc. So that's how I started Ampersat. It was literally a learning experience. I had no intentions of selling the game or anything like that. It was just, I'm going to learn how to make a game.
And so when did you decide to like, hey, I'm going to put this on Steam? Because it came on Steam first, right? And then Nintendo.
Yep.
So how did you decide, hey, I want to submit this to Steam?
Well, I guess it was near the end of it, and I had some friends and other developers and stuff playing it, and I was basically saying, "This is damn good." Like that, you've got to sell this game. You know, it's not just a project, you know, that you do and file away. So um, I, you know, it also had, how to put this, it had enough content to be worth something.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you could justify spending $10 on this thing.
Okay, so
Um,
give us the sales pitch a little bit. Exactly what I know. It's like 50 levels and bosses, and go. You do that. You do that better than I do.
well, yeah, I mean, it's a handcrafted adventure, so it does have 50 levels, and they're all handmade. So that it's not procedurally generated where it's just random bits stuck together. They're all designed and I put together, you know, block by block. And then yeah, there's 10 bosses. Well, 11 technically. There's a final boss, and they're all completely different. You know, some of them are little kind of puzzly bosses, and some are just knockdown, drag out fights. The levels are, some of them are quite long, and then near the end of the game, they get kind of in these confined spaces, and they're kind of bullet hell shooter experiences. But there's also a bunch of kind of optional content, like that you can unlock a well in the village, and in that well is randomly generated levels. So you can just keep grinding through them infinitely down in the well, and it's all it has the graphical style of the old Rogue games. And there's like little quests that you can unlock, and every level has a secret chest, and every level has a bonus word that you can capture, and all this stuff. So there is a lot of content. To 100% the game takes 20 hours or so, and just to complete it normally is 10 hours or so. So there's a fair bit in there.
Yeah, and I just put the video up from Nintendo where it's on there. So what is it like? Like what's the process? Like let's say there's a game designer out there who has a game. What does it take to get to Steam?
Well, I should cover learning to do it and make it first, I guess. If you'd like me to, anyway.
No, go ahead. Go.
So basically, it's because I had no schooling in it. What I did, I just went and got a couple of online courses and worked through those. There's a place called Udemy, Udemy, and there are a couple of courses on there that were really fantastic. I loved them. They made you do things practically yourself, and part of the course was actually making a couple of little games. And I did that for about a month, just hardcore, 12 hours a day study. And then at the end of it, I thought, right, I'm just going to jump in.
So how many hours do you think you're into these courses and studying before you jump in and start really developing your first game or whatever?
I think each one was like 100-hour course, something like that. They're fairly meaty. I mean, you could probably do it quicker, and of course, some people take a couple of years to, actually get proper schooling. I will say I'm not a very broad programmer. Like I've learned what I needed to learn to make this game, and now the next one. But if you put me in and I have to make a relational database or something, I'll be lost.
Yeah. But that's like the best, to me, that's the best way to learn, right? Learn as you go. Because as someone who's gone through the American college system, I can tell you, I was talking to people, I was like, there's some classes I've never used again, and I can't remember them, so I like the hands-on kind of approach. So you continue. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Well, it's so much easier these days, like particularly using Unity or Unreal or Godot or any of the others. They take care of a lot of that deep programming that you don't really need to care about anymore, like memory management and rendering and things like that. You can focus on the gameplay.
So what kind of classes, like what were some of the names in case people are interested, if you remember?
What I can do is leave them in a comment on the video. I'll put links to it. I'll just make a note to do that.
Yeah. So you make the game, right? Or this is your learning thing. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Because I'm really curious. How do you get this to Steam, and how do you get it to Nintendo now that you have your game done?
Yeah, so a lot of indie devs will just publish it themselves, and we had started going down that route. So that's where my wife came in and started helping on the publishing side, setting up social media accounts, and we set up Steam. So I actually had it on Steam, approved on Steam on our own without the publisher. And so that process is actually really easy. You pay a fee of like it's $100 or $200 or something, and they have to verify your identity with bank accounts and so on. And then you have a developer Steam account and you upload a game. They have to check it, so they'll go through and play the game. They'll verify that it works, that there's no offensive content, that the ratings are correct, all of that kind of thing. And they can be pretty strict. Like, for example, if you say the game is fully compatible with the gamepad, they will test every single thing in the game that the gamepad works. And I failed first time because I had it where you had to click a button to activate the gamepad. They said, no, you have to take care of users who literally don't have a keyboard attached to their PC.
Wow.
And that makes sense now with Steam Deck in particular.
Right.
So yeah, you had to be able to play every aspect of the game without even having a keyboard or mouse attached to the computer.
So at this point, when they tell you, hey, you got to change this, is the game already published or is it kind of hidden?
No. Yeah, it's hidden. So it stays up there hidden. You can send out beta keys. You can do, various testing with their systems and so on. But no one can buy it yet. So once they approve it, though, it's up to you whenever you release it. I think you need to have your store approved as well, like not just the game. They have to approve all the content on your store. And then I think a week after that, you can release it. But we thought, you know what? Why don't we just look at a publisher? Because we noticed very early on the social media side and marketing side was not our forte, and we were doing very, very poorly at that. So we thought if a publisher can handle that side of things, why not? We didn't really care about the money side of things, so we didn't care about giving them a cut. So I wrote to, and also getting it on consoles. I didn't have developer kits. You have to get approved as a Nintendo developer, all that jazz. I was lost at sea. So I thought if a publisher can do all that for me, fantastic. So we put together a list of about 50 publishers and just sent out a bunch of emails. You prepare a press kit, essentially like a pitch deck, which just goes through the game. You put a link to a demo of the game so they can actually play it, videos and so on. And you just wait for the responses. And that can be disheartening. I think we got responses from about, it was only 10 to 20%. Well, actually, no, it must have been more because we did get a couple dozen responses, but a lot of them just will never reply. And then a lot of them are just, thanks, keep it up, let us know next time, polite refusals. But we're lucky we actually got half a dozen who were interested in taking it on. And in the end, I had 2 firm offers from publishers to publish the game. So we chose one. And the reason I chose that one is because, look, the other one were a bigger publisher and more well-known. They've got some very well-known games, but they wanted to focus more on DLC. They didn't want to do consoles at all, and they just wanted to pump out DLC. And it wasn't that type of game. I didn't want to do that. Whereas the other publisher, they really wanted to do consoles. So I thought, you beauty, let's go.
And this is for Ampersat, right?
Yep.
And so do they do like the ESRB stuff, or is that something you did initially? Like
they handled all of that. I didn't do any of that. I'm not sure they did ESRB or just PEGI, which I think is basically self.
Well, on Nintendo, it has an ESRB rating.
Oh, it does? Oh, they must
yes,
have
it E10 and up. And I didn't see it on Steam, but I did see it on the Nintendo.
Yeah, Steam, you don't need to do it.
Okay, so Steam doesn't need ratings, but
you have to self-rate. You do have to answer questions about content, and I think only Brazil, they have some strict things about you have to get it rated for Brazil or something.
Okay, yeah. So you get the publisher that gets you on Steam, and what? By the way, what's the typical take, or what do you think? I mean, you're new. You're kind of new being like getting a publisher, but maybe but you know more than I do. What do you think the typical take of a publisher is? Is it like 20%? Is it half? Like how much do they get of the cut?
So the most common is 30%. But I've seen it, well, I know a place that took 90%, but they put millions of funding into it though.
Okay.
And this was several years ago. I think the competition's a bit hotter now. But yeah, 30 is kind of the benchmark. You can get 20, and sometimes it all depends on how much money they put into it. So in my case, the game was finished. It didn't need money. But if they're funding a significant portion, they'll get a bigger cut.
Okay. And is there cut of the like net? Is it like, so I know Steam and Nintendo, they take a cut, right?
Yeah. So they take 30%.
They both take 30%. So Ampersat is a $10 game, I believe, on both, $9.99. I hope you don't mind me adding the penny, but so maybe your publisher does, but it's a $10 game, right? So like from that $10 sales, that $10 of sales, do they get $3 and then Nintendo gets $3 and you get the last $4? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so that's at the top level, it comes from the distributor. So whether that's Nintendo or Steam, they take the 30 off the top. And then for what's left, the publisher then takes their 30, and then you get what's left over.
Okay, so they take so there's so in this case, it's a $10 game, assuming it's not a sale. So that's $7 left over. So they're taking 30% of the $7. They're taking like $2, your publisher is, and then you get the other $5 or whatever. So basically, you get, so in your case, and probably some other developers, you get half of whatever is actually it sold for, roughly.
Basically.
So just to give people an idea, because we don't know. I mean, I don't know like how much, and of course it depends. If there's a team, then you have to split it up, right? Like it's split up, but that's one of the benefits of being the solo man in the sense is that you get that. So how is
actually it's a little in my situation, I can't give you the number, but because of NDAs, but the Switch I get less from. The reason for that is because they handled the porting to that.
Okay.
Which I was happy with because, I had no idea how to do it. So they handled all of that. And they were going to do Xbox and Xbox and PlayStation. They exist, but they haven't put it out yet. I'm not sure why.
So it's still possible. It could still come out to Xbox and PS.
They probably will. I think they'll just backlogged.
Okay. All right. So in each of those cases, whoever's doing the porting, I'm sorry, they get a cut too.
Yeah. I mean, not always, but in my situation, they did.
Okay. Well, it's fascinating. So do you know how the sales are doing so far on Steam and on Switch? Because we were talking offline, like Steam and Switch, like their eShops, massive, right? Like there's so many people and so many games out there. And here you have this game that's I haven't seen an ad blitz. I don't know if your publisher advertised it or at all.
No, not at all.
So no advertising. So basically word of mouth, right? Which as a game developer, you're just like hoping that like Metal Jesus plays it or something. You're hoping that it makes some noise somehow.
That like our publisher had an example. He had a game he released a couple of years ago and it didn't sell much at all, and then suddenly out of the blue 2 years after release, a massive influencer played it on a stream and they sold like 10,000 copies in a day, and up till then they had sold a few hundred.
That's crazy. So how has sales been, if you don't mind me asking?
I mean, you could answer it two ways. One is it was pretty much in line with expectation. Two is terrible.
So are you willing to say how much money you've made off of Switch and off of Steam so far, just as a game developer?
Look,
for your end?
Overall, it's sold about 1,000 copies.
Okay.
And it's about 50-50 Switch and PC.
Okay, so well, that says something about the Switch because it's been on Steam longer.
Yeah, right? It was a month longer, I think, something like that. Switch was definitely selling faster.
Right. So like this game development world is a little bit cutthroat, or it's like everyone's struggling. And I know you told me like this is something you're doing almost like more as a hobby. Like it's a professional game. Don't get me wrong, but it's like you don't need it to succeed. You're not one of these people. But there are game developers. They're like, man, if this game bombs, I don't have food.
Oh, so like I could buy pizza every day, and that's about it. If I was relying on this to live on.
So a pizza a day. And I don't know what are pizza prices in Australia, because here, I can go to Little Caesars and get a $6 pizza in American dollars. What does a pizza cost in Australia, and is it any good there?
Well, it vastly depends. So Domino's, some days you can get $5 pizzas. Normally they're 10, 12, something like that.
And
But then
that's
you get the
and
gourmet
but then
pizzas are like $20.
but then you have to add in the inflation or the currency rate, right? Because so what's $5 for you isn't as $5 for me is
Yeah.
cheaper than $5 for you, is my understanding, correct?
Yeah, so $10 here is like $7 for you.
Okay, yeah.
But
So
but then you have all the other differences. Like our minimum wage is double your minimum wage. For example. So our average wage is a much higher, but then we have much higher taxes. So it all kind of balances out.
So Ampersat is out there. Explain like did you say is it a twin stick shooter, or like what's the gameplay like?
Yeah, look, moment to moment, it's more like a twin stick shooter, but it's kind of an action RPG overall. Like there's a lot of leveling up and finding loot, buying and selling loot, that kind of thing.
And if people are interested, they can get a demo off of Steam, right? For free, I think.
Yeah, it's got 2 levels, I think, something like that.
2 of the 50, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can get the 2 if you want to just try it out. I think I saw it was getting like a 7 out of 10 overall on Steam or something. Is it in that ballpark? Is that right?
They have a funny system. Like overall, it's had 34 reviews and 90% are positive, but they don't count all of them in their summary. So in the summary, it's 76%, just under 80%. But it's kind of weird how they do it. So. But overall, it's had a really good response. I mean, there were dozens of videos and live streams, and again, 90% of those were really positive. I got to watch people in, 8 to 10 different languages playing it. That was really wild.
Do you speak any other languages?
No, I don't. But that's one of the things the publisher did. They paid for all the translations into 10 languages.
So publisher takes a lot of the burden off of a game developer for what they take.
They really help. Yeah.
So, okay. So Ampersat is out. It's on Switch. It's on the PC, on Steam. Hopefully it sounds like it's going to be on the Xbox and PlayStation markets. And now you have a second game in the works.
Yeah. So there's a funny story there. See, I finished Ampersat over a year ago. A year before it was released, actually. And it sat on the shelf for a year because they wanted to release the Switch at the same time as the PC. Within a couple of weeks of each other, basically. And the porting team were totally backed up, like I said. And it just kept getting pushed back and back. And it eventually took a year before it got ported correctly. So in that period, I just started another game. I was just sick of waiting, and I thought, bugger it. And I had this idea for for a game, and started making it.
And what is it called, and what is it about? And
it's called Crossover, subtitled Roll for Initiative. It was actually just called Roll for Initiative, and then the day before we put it up on Steam, we noticed another game called Roll for Initiative. It had only been released a couple of weeks before. So we had to change, like within 24 hours, make up a new name for it. So it's now called Crossover, which actually suits it really well.
And it looks like, there's actually, okay, let me, and explain what it is. So this is like a D&D style game? Is this,
It's completely mental.
Okay, it's completely that's your like slogan in the magazine ad. It's completely mental. There you go. And some guy's brain blowing up, like his head is like the top of his skull's missing, and your game's coming out of it. There you go. See, I just did that. Your publisher can do that free of charge.
It's okay. It's kind of like a match 3 RPG. but an action game at the same time. So a match 3 game like Bejeweled and Candy Crush and all of that.
Oh, everybody knows that. That's the
Yeah.
game no one admits to liking, but everyone plays.
Yeah, I mean, they're addictive as hell. So basically, I've made the most hardcore match 3 game ever. It's like a real-time action match 3 game where you're doing the matches to power your spells and weapons that you're throwing at enemies that are walking around, and all that's done in real time. And so the setting of it is a kid in his bedroom in the 80s, and a thunderstorm has mystically activated his Commodore 64 computer in the corner of the room.
Of course.
And the pixel monsters from his computer games are coming out into his bedroom and onto his desk. And he's creating a character for a tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons with pen and paper. And the monsters are invading his character sheet and trying to kill his character in the pen and paper game. I told you it was mental.
Yeah. So it's like you're playing a game of a kid playing a game where the character comes out of the game to attack the game the kid is playing that you're playing. Okay, I got it.
And within that game, you play a game of match 3.
Yes. And all of a sudden you're playing Candy Crush. No, it's better than Candy Crush, but yes, that is, yeah, I'm looking at the video. Like, I haven't seen this yet, and this looks really interesting. this is really kind of bizarre.
But somehow it works. Like, it's really fun. It's super addictive. We just had a 2-week playtest, a public playtest on Steam, where anyone could sign up and play the game for a couple of weeks. And they had a feedback form to fill out, and 91% said it exceeded expectations and they would recommend it to a friend. So as crazy as it is, people really get into it.
So Microprose is doing this?
Yeah. The old Microprose.
Okay, because they did not do Ampersat. So how'd this happen?
Well, I actually had an in at Microprose, but I made it very clear.
He's got photographs of somebody.
I made it very clear, though, that they shouldn't be doing it as a favor to me. I only do it if they actually want to do it, because I would have found another publisher for this for sure. In fact, another publisher I was in contact with would have gone nuts for this game. It's right up their alley. But no, Microprose really wanted it. The CEO of Microprose is absolutely addicted to it. He showed me his Steam stats on the game. He's played it for hundreds of hours. He loves it.
I don't know. Now, is Microprose like what is their status today in the industry? Because I know they're like a huge name from back in the day. Are they still do they still carry a lot of weight? Like, I'm ignorant when it comes to this.
Yeah, look, not as much as the old days. That they were the number one, back in the day, and they disappeared for 20 years. They're resurrected now and they're building up. They still have really good name. Their releases so far have been really good. High Fleet, for example, they released, that was their first kind of new release, and it's a sensational game. Fantastic game.
And so what is the plans for this one then? Is this going to be just Steam only, or are they looking to expand it to consoles?
No, this will be Steam only. It won't work on a console. I don't think. Okay. You really need the mouse to play it.
Gotcha. Well, if it's big enough, they'll make it work somehow, I suppose.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, that's the way. So, and this is coming. When do you think it's going to actually be released? Because it says 2023. It doesn't give much details beyond that.
Probably a year from now, I'd say.
Probably a year from now. Well, look now. Are you finished? Is the game totally finished, or are you still working on it?
Oh, still working on it. See, there's two game modules inside it. There's a fantasy module and a sci-fi module. So it's kind of like double the content of a game, and each one has like 50 levels. There's a lot of stuff in there. So I've finished the fantasy module, but I still have to do the sci-fi module.
Okay. So you're still working on it, but what percent would you say is done? Like, I know that's like a kind of, it could change, it can fluctuate, but if you'd had to guess,
a Tommy 95%.
Yeah, no. Give me a real number.
Oh, look, in terms of content, it's just over 50%.
Okay.
In terms of programming, it's like 99%. You know, the second game module is basically content. It's the same engine, essentially. It's the same
Okay.
gameplay, but all the content's different. So, and a lot of that I'm not doing myself. So in this game, I realized, look, my limitations. Ampersat came out really well, like better than I expected, but I'm not a natural artist. I'm not a natural musician in the slightest. So for this, I've got artists and musicians, doing the work. For
And is this
the
something that Microprose they handled this, or is this something where you hired them?
they've been really helpful. So I hired most of them, but they have some in-house staff who they've lent to me who've been fantastic. So the 3D models in the game are all from their internal team, and yeah, they did a great job. And now one of their artists is doing work on the sci-fi module, and the UE artist is internal to their team as well.
So
Um,
I'm curious. I like because I'm fascinated by this because as a gamer, I don't see the behind the scenes stuff so much. So now you're with Microprose and you got more people working on it. Is your cut going to be roughly the same as Ampersat, or are you going to lose some of the cut?
It'll be less. I can't really discuss the details of it, but
Okay.
it'll be a bit less.
No, I
That
appreciate.
Yeah, because they are covering a lot of the costs. For even the people I'm hiring, they're covering some of. But it all depends. We can have a sliding scale essentially. So
Okay. Well, I hope the sliding scale slides in your favor. And no, and I appreciate your honesty and openness because the one thing I get from this is that first of all, for game developers, you know, if you're starting out, it really kind of has to be a labor of love and something that you're doing as kind of with the hobby mindset because it takes a while. Because you're telling me like Ampersat was done a while ago and this game not going to be released till 2023. You really have to either have like a big lucky break or you have to be willing to ride out the storm, right? Or just like kind of do it and let it
absolutely.
grow.
Well, I see there's three ways to do it. One is if you're young and you can afford to just do this for a couple of years. Whether it's you're just out of school or still in school. The second way is just doing it on weekends and nights. And a lot of really good developers do that. They're working. Sometimes they work at a game studio, and then at night they work on their own game. And Axiom Verge is an example of that. But then it takes a lot longer. It can take 5-6 years doing it that way. But you just plow through it. And then the third way is if you are in a position where you don't have to work for a limited period or whatever.
How many
And
hours do
you
you
just
think?
focus on it.
How many hours do you think it took you to create Ampersat, and how many hours for this crossover game?
So Ampersat was it was about 14 months of 7 days a week, 12 hours a day.
Wow.
I did not take a break. I think 2 days out of that time I took a break, but every other day I was working on it. I went hard on that. But remember, I was learning as well. So, an experienced developer could have done that quicker. So, yeah, that took a long time. This game has been just over a year. I started May last year. But I've been taking this one a bit easier. Certainly less than 12 hours a day, more like 5 or 6 hours a day.
But that's still a lot of time. That's still a lot of time to go into that. So, I wish
Yeah.
you nothing but the success with those games. Do you have a third game in your brain for when you're done with crossover, or is that something that's kind of out of your brain right now?
I tell you the amount of commitment to make a bigger game, and these are not bigger games. I mean, these are relatively small, but for one man and the amount of content in them, it drags on. I find quick games more fun. Like So what I found, remember I said I want to try every aspect of making the game. The thing I found the most fun was programming. And with programming, you do most of that up front, and then the content is what takes the vast amount of time. So, like for example, on both of the games, probably 20% of the time is writing the game code, and then the rest is building out the game. And for me, that first 20% is the fun part, and everything else is kind of a drag. So in the future, I don't really want to do a big multi-year project like that again. I'd rather do the hater games where it's just a really quick. You have a quick idea for a game, you bang it out. It's a bit of fun. Give it away for free, and that'll be it. So that's kind of where I'm heading. Probably not 1-day games, but more like 1-month games, or a couple of weeks.
Well, is this something where you might like do 99 cent? Like, well, I didn't ask you that. Who sets the price? Is it your publisher who sets the price? Is it Steam? Who sets the price and decides this is a $9.99 game on Steam?
No, it's a collaboration between you and the publisher. I think I technically had the veto, but we kind of agreed together.
So if you wanted, like, could you like make these games that you're talking about, these 1-month games, and put them on Steam for 99 cents or whatever?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess it'd be game on a game by game basis. If I thought it was worth a buck, put it on. Otherwise, free. And I'm even interested in learning for other retro systems, like actually making an NES game or a PIC 08 game. PIC 08's like a fictional console.
With limitations, right? Like Nintendo or Atari style limitations on it, ColecoVision.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of interested in doing that, or a Commodore 64 game or something.
Well, I definitely know that people are into like the retro style games, with the Evercade and with everything else. So I think that it would be interesting to see your take on some of those games. So let's talk quickly about the Intellivision Amico hater games, and then we'll just talk about the Amico for the rest of the time. I know some people have been waiting for that. Not that there's a lot to talk about, but there's some stuff to talk about. So, so you made how many hater games? Did you make 4 of them?
Yeah, technically 4. One's not really a game as such, but you could class it as one.
And you made the Hater, which is the shark, right?
Yep.
Is it Hater Piece? Did I say it right? It's the Skeen game, which is Intellivision Skeen. And I'm drawing a blank. Hater Smash, which is Astro Smash, which, by the way, if you guys want to see me play them, I've live streamed all those games. My computer's not the most powerful, so it doesn't run it smoothly as it is in person. So that's not, if you watch those streams, please understand those games run really smooth. And then what was the last one? Because I haven't played the last one. I'm sorry, I haven't played the last one yet.
It was Hans's 10 levels of government funding.
Which of course refers to Hans Ippisch from the European side, and you're like stamping papers or something, approving stuff. Is that it?
It's basically papers, please, where you get presented a game idea. And I took some of the ideas from that thread on Reddit where I think you put some ideas in yourself.
I did something about what was that 70s show?
Welcome Home Cotter.
Welcome, that sitcom, the Welcome Home Cotter game, because I was like, because in my brain I'm thinking, okay, we got the Harlem Globetrotters, Evel Knievel. What else would fit that? Everything. What the kid. Let's see. You need it. And someone, Mr. T-Bone, says you need a Night Stalker inspired hater dungeon to complete the collection.
So in that game, I took the titles that people made up and I wrote synopses for the games, and so you get presented them as a government funding agent, that game, and you stamp it, approve or deny. But the trick of the game is some of them are submitted by Hans and some aren't. And so you have to approve only the ones submitted by Hans.
And it seemed like the reception was pretty popular for the most part, at least in the Amico sphere. Let me ask you. So it's interesting because the hater games, you took what some people call the critics, the haters, and you put their icons in it, right? Like in Hater Smash, you're blowing up like these people who have criticized the system, right? In the Skeen game, you're avoiding these snowballs, these gigantic snowballs that look like the icons, and Shark, you're eating them. So and avoiding the bigger ones, of course. So did you hear? Because it seemed like it's interesting because it's like attacking the critics, right? Like you're actually blowing up critics,
Right.
But it seemed like there was only the critics who were really getting into the game,
Yeah.
like I don't were there any like pro Amico people who messaged you like, hey, I just want to let you know I enjoyed it,
No, none at all. That was really surprising to me. I thought they would have had fun with it, and here I'm gonna blow up Darius. I thought they would really get a kick out of it, but nope, not a single one. I had a couple of nasty comments, but no positive comments.
Why do you think that is? Because that blows my mind. Because I would think like some of these people are like, hey, let's check this out. We're
Yeah.
blowing up Smash JT or whoever was in some of them. Like, why do you think none of them were even trying it or admitting to trying it?
Yeah, I found that really strange. I thought it could kind of bring both sides together in a way of, they're both having fun doing the same thing. But no, most of them publicly wouldn't even acknowledge it. That they existed. I don't know if they genuinely didn't know they existed or
They
I can't
had to
explain
know
it.
because it seems to have cooled off, but there was a time where for me personally, every day I was checking YouTube to see if there was any new Amico content, right?
Yeah,
Like I was like semi addicted to it. I was addicted to it. And I was, checking. I like this,
same.
the story was fascinating to me as someone who's like once excited about it and then slowly seeing it crashing and burning and like just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm like, wow, this is one of the most fascinating stories of this is like game history, right? To bring back the Intellivision name only for it to like turn into this fiasco. It's a documentary playing out before your eyes. I wonder. So each of these games you say took you one day to make,
Yep.
right? And you did use some assets that you had, like you would buy graphic packs or whatever. So you
Yeah.
had some stuff you could just throw in the game. So you didn't have to create all the music and the art, but you had to put the pieces together. You kind of basically you bought a Lego set and you put the pieces together. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Sort of like I did all the code. Like I didn't use any any third-party code for it. I pulled bits of my own code from other games for things like saving the high score. The routine to do that, or some of the menu stuff. I just copy pasted from some of my games, but I didn't use any third-party code. But yeah, pretty much all of the art and music were assets, or in Hater Piece, I used Tommy Amiko's fantastic soundtrack. That was a blast. That was the not safe for work version.
Yeah. So
But
like
yeah, when they have like these humble bundles and things like that for developer assets, and they'll put in hundreds of dollars worth of assets for $10, $20, that kind of thing. And so usually when they do that, I'll just pick it up because you never know what you're going to use for prototyping. I mean, they're licensed. You can use them in commercial games if you want to. Generally, I don't. In the new game, I've used a couple little things, just background like rocks and stuff like that. But I pick them up anyway, just for prototyping, or one day I may want to put a game together. And so one day I was just, I don't want to say bored, I was frustrated. I was kind of in COVID isolation. I didn't have COVID, but I had a close contact. I was looking after a sick cat, and the phase of development I was on with Crossover was really boring, incredibly boring. And I thought, bugger it, I'm just going to do something different today. I'm just going to make a new game. And it struck me, why don't I just make Astro Smash? See how long that would take. And I gave myself the day, and I got it done. I think Astro Smash was about 16 hours. Yeah, it was just for fun. Came out pretty good. A couple of things I'd do differently if I did it again, but it played quite well. And yeah, so I had all these assets that I just pulled out, like the spaceship and the stuff in the background and stuff like that.
no,
And so I just coded it.
That is a fun game, especially for a day. I think, let me get to this comic acknowledging the existence of the games made in the day that look and play every bit as good as the premier Amico titles that took them years to be admitting how incompetent their hero was. And let me just say, first of all, no offense to you, Gaterooz, but I can tell, like, in some of the Amico games, they put more than 16 hours of work in them. I can
Oh,
tell that's,
absolutely.
so I'm not going to say like your games automatically eclipsed them, but I will say they're comparable. You can like put them and
Right.
say, hey, look, this game shows you what you could do. And it does show, there's people like, why are these games taking so long to finish? And it does make you wonder. Now, I understand bugs happen and things happen that you don't expect. 95% of the game can go on a particular clip, but then the last 5% takes you
Yep.
hours longer. I understand that stuff happens. But do you think that's one of the reasons why some of these pro Amico people were afraid to acknowledge these games, because of how good they looked after one day, and you're still waiting for years for the Amico stuff to come out?
I think there's some truth to that. Now, that wasn't my intent in the slightest when I did it. I didn't even think about that. But I know that some people kind of picked it up as a rallying cry, like Darius, for example. I'm not criticizing that, just that they kind of use that as a hammer, to smash Intellivision. Somewhat fairly, I mean, but somewhat unfairly as well. Like, I should say that when you're making a game, making a quick prototype, like for example, Ampersat, I made a prototype of that game in one day, where I had the basic controls done and you could walk around and shoot things. But the game took a year, over a year. So sometimes it's misleading to say this can be done in a day, where really it's building all the content. But on the flip side of that, the games that Intellivision are making, they don't have a lot of content anyway. Like Astro Smash has 10 levels. And they're static levels. It's just a static background and rocks that are falling down. It's not, I mean, there's a couple of UFOs, but it's not a list of 100 different assets they've got to make. Shark. I mean, again, 10, 20 levels, but they're all static screens. So these games should not be taking so long to make, but they shouldn't be taking a day. I would have said I could have made the exact Astro Smash in about 3 months, but then you also have QA and localization and things like that can take a little bit of more time.
Yeah, yeah. So you give credit where it's due, because I definitely know that. Let me put that up there. I definitely know that some of these, yeah, Astro Smash had bosses and stuff like that, which you didn't have in your game.
Yeah.
But yeah, and at the same point, why wasn't more done by now? So here's the question. Starblazer asks, is the Amico still being released? Do you think the Intellivision Amico will still be released?
It depends what you mean by release. Like, some people seem to think if they ship out 20 units, they've released the console. That's not the case. I would consider it released to be pre-orders are done and anyone can go and buy it. That's what I would consider a proper release. I don't think they'll ever reach that point.
Do you think the pre-orders will be fulfilled?
No, not all of them. I think they'll get some units out though.
Just hand making them?
Yeah, or if not handmade, then very low production runs. But I can't see them doing more than a couple of thousand units. I just can't see it.
Because right now I looking at their financials, and you've looked at their financials and looking at their workforce. From what I understand, they've really, like, how many people do you think is working at Amico right in television entertainment right now? Because we know like their offices are closed, or a lot of them are closed. They're now, their main address is like a UPS store PO box, which some businesses do. It doesn't mean you don't have an office, but we're getting reports that their offices are vacated. How many people you still are actually working on this thing?
From what I can tell, actually, as in technical staff, I think there's about 5 people. And then I think there's 3 or 4 in finance and management.
So less than 10 people working right now, when they were once at like 60, right? With offices all over the globe. Don't they have to have the FCC approval to even sell the things?
They do. Now, there's conflicting reports on that. Intellivision and their boosters say they passed the testing, but they just haven't submitted the test for the final approval. That's not exactly how it works. You need the testing to be done by an FCC certified body, whether that's a lab or the FCC themselves. From what I understand, they've passed their internal recreation of those tests, but the actual body, certified body, hasn't done the testing. So I could be wrong, but the thing is, if you had that certified testing done, why wouldn't you have the certification? That's the last step. If that's done, you pretty much automatically have the certification. So they can't have done that, in my opinion. And Kevtris and others who have done FCC testing basically agree with that. So they may be confident that they could pass that testing, but I don't think they've actually done it, or we'd see the result.
See, my this is just my take. My take or my feeling, my gut feeling is that they're cash strapped, right? They have very little money. From what I understand, people are still waiting for their refund. Some have gotten them. I don't know how bad it is. It's impossible to tell. But I don't see the money to even make the units. I don't see, because anything they make, they owe Sudesh $100 on per unit. Fig is supposed to get some units, I thought. I don't see how they have the money to even produce it.
Well, see, they have lots of little bits and pieces from developer kits and demo units and test production runs internally. Now, when I say test production run, I'm just talking about the guys sitting at a bench putting a couple together that we've seen videos of. So they have bits and pieces that I'm pretty sure they could cobble together a handful of units, 10, 20 units, something like that. And, according to RetroBro, that was their plan. They would get 20 or so units together, send them out to influencers, make happy day videos, and just put that facade up that everything's great and hope that would attract the investors. To actually make manufactured units, no, they don't, unless they're getting more investment, they don't have that money. I believe in the past, when Tommy was talking about their production runs, they said the tooling for the production was like $250,000 to set up a run. And then the material costs on top of that. And they don't appear to have that kind of capital to outlay. And the other issue they have is the cost of manufacturing is higher than the money they're getting for these units. Unless they're building in quantities of 50,000 or more, their per unit cost, they're losing money on every unit that goes through, even before Sudesh takes his cut. So they can't rely on just getting the rest of the payment from the pre-order people to cover that. They're going to go further and further into debt for each unit they make. And particularly if they're doing small runs of 1,000 or so, that cost is going to be double, double the price that they're getting paid for it. So they really have two choices. One is they get a ton of money, which is what they expected from Start Engine, and do a big production run, or they do a small production run and they take the hit. And that could put them several $100,000 further into debt. But it would get the machine out there, and then they would hope to get more money on the back of that.
So you're saying because my what I'm asking myself is, if they're going to lose money making systems and they don't have money, why would they even make the systems? Right. So Are you saying the hope is they get those systems out and they hook an investor or something just from those systems, or stir up demand?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's got to be the only look. There's a carrot and the stick. So that's the carrot. The stick would be if they're facing some kind of potential litigation from people for not releasing the system. And that could prompt them to get a few, you mentioned Fig, they're owed 100 units, for example. Now, how much of that could actually hit them personally? It's probably very little. So I don't really know what their strategy is. Are they hoping to push it into a situation where they can recoup some of their debts by selling off the assets, for example? Because if they pushed it into bankruptcy now, Fig would own everything. They're not going to see a penny, right? Between what they owe Fig and the breaches in Fig's contract. So they, in the contract between Fig and Intellivision had to warranty that the money from Fig combined with the money they already had was sufficient to develop that console and release it. Clearly that was not true, because they got the money and they never released the console. So they've breached their agreement with Fig. Fig would have, I'm not a lawyer, I've done a year of contract law in my degree, but that's as far as it goes. But Fig would surely have some kind of argument there that they breached that contract and they are owed the money back. So if it was pushed into bankruptcy, they may be the top creditor. And hence they would essentially own the company. So maybe they're trying to get to a situation where they can satisfy the Fig contract so that if it does go into bankruptcy, the assets can be distributed among themselves as loanees to the company instead of all going to Fig.
So I know Tony from the Geek Getaway, I believe he said, I mean, he announced on his channel through Days Gaming that they were planning to do Chapter 11 bankruptcy, that they're going to file for it. And by the way, to say you're going to do Chapter 11 bankruptcy, it could mean like you're going to actually start the process, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not a automatic thing. There's different steps you have to take. So they could have planned to do it and then something got in the way. I don't know if I don't know his sources, so I don't know if they're correct or not. But he said that. Then I think I heard him. And by the way, he streams on these nights. This just happened to be the only night me and Gatoroos could get together and chat. So, hey to the Geek Getaway gang if they're listening at any point in time. We weren't trying to compete or anything. We just wanted to have a talk. But he said that Sudesh stopped the bankruptcy, which I think is possible because the bankruptcy has to be approved by the creditors. I think that's a step.
That's not strictly right. So the creditors don't have to approve entering Chapter 11.
But they have to approve the plan that
yes.
they present to the courts.
Yeah, so that happens later. So that's between the court and the creditors, not the company and the creditors.
Do you think it's possible that Sudesh could throw his weight around and say, you better not do this?
Well, see, they may, I don't know the constitution of their company. Their company may say that they need unanimous board approval for entering liquidation. So in that case, Sudesh as a board member could be holding it up in that capacity.
Because Sudesh could see what you were saying. This is just, speculation just for fun. But, Sudesh could say, if you go into bankruptcy, I may never get my money, my $100 per system, if it goes to Fig first. So I'm going to drag my feet or make this a pain for you if you do this.
And by the way, that's pure speculation with Fig. Fig may have a totally different relationship. I'm just looking at what's on paper.
Right.
And Fig would need to take legal action to do that. It wouldn't be automatic at all.
And let me ask you a question. Why would Fig get 100 systems? Like, what are they going to do with them? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so there's a weird thing. It's technically for promotion, it says. But there's a whole thing about where Fig can sell or distribute the systems themselves, and then they keep some additional money, I think. Yes, like there's clauses in the contract about remitting the money. So Fig sells the system and then they remit the money back to Intellivision. So I don't know if it's that they actually want to sell them or whether it was just for promotional, which is weird. Like, what are they going to do? They're not going to set up kiosks in malls. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why they would want 100 systems if it was actually promotion.
Yeah, that seemed like maybe to give away or maybe as incentive. I don't know. It was just, I've never heard of a company saying, yeah, we'll do business with you, but we want some of the systems ourselves. It's like, okay, well, whatever. But that's what the story is crazy. The story is absolutely insane. All these players in it, there's so much drama in it. It is fascinating. It is fascinating to like try to figure out what's going on. So do you think that they're still going today just on a hope and a prayer that things work out? Like they've lost everybody. Like who do they have left that can actually get the system out?
Look, honestly, here's the funny thing, right? This is the staff they should have had all along. Maybe not the specific people, but this is kind of the level they should have been at. They didn't need 60 people at the stage they were at. Most of their development was outsourced. Why did they need these 60 people? It was a horrendously wasteful operation that they had, and the number of offices and so on.
Yeah, I never understood the number of offices. I know they want to be worldwide, but I was like, what startup needs 5 offices around the world?
Yeah, it's crazy. They should have had a smaller company around this size until the system was ready to go. And they could have taken their time. They shouldn't have announced things, until it was ready. Like the guys who made Playdate, they already had everything ready. Their FCC certification was fully approved. They were ready to hit go on the manufacturer before they took pre-orders. And so once they took pre-orders, they were literally rolling off the lines. This is why, and people didn't know what the hell they were doing. It was kept secret while they were developing it. I mean, not the whole time, but until they were confident in what they had. Intellivision did the complete opposite. They announced everything before they'd even decided on what chip's going to be on it, what price range it's going to be, what games they're actually going to have. You look at the video, they named 50 games. None of them came to fruition. They had all these different games eventually. It was just done completely backwards.
Do you think that they were intentionally misleading people at the beginning with all these prices and whatnot, or do you think they were just hopeful that that's what they could do even if they didn't have a plan to do it?
I think it was extreme negligence. I don't think it was knowingly, as in they go, right, we know this is not right, but we're saying it. I think it was, like you say, wishful thinking, but to such an extreme that it's negligent. Like to pull a price of 180, 150 to 180 out of thin air without even doing the basic homework on what this would actually cost. I know defenders will say, well, it's not a lie because they didn't say it would definitely be that price. That was just what they're aiming for. But you've got to do an amount of due diligence before you say things like that. So it's really on that borderline. I personally am in the camp that it wasn't a scam originally, but the moment they took pre-order and investor money while they must have known the system was not ready to go, that's when it became a scam.
Because I go back and forth with this thing because Tommy Tallarico is such an interesting guy. He's such, and I know there's been talk lately about The Secret. Are you familiar with The Secret?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, he's a big follower of The Secret. I am not an expert on The Secret, okay? But my basic gist understanding of it is that if you believe it enough, it'll happen, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're positive, if you say it, it's like waking up and it's like two people wake up and one person says today's going to be a great day and the other person says today's going to be a miserable day. Well, the positive person is probably more likely to have a good day because they're starting out with a good mindset, right? So,
Right.
but it's taking that to the extreme where, we're going to have this massive success. So sometimes I wonder if what we heard was this secret style daydreaming.
Yep.
Saying, yeah, we're on the launch pad because I'm imagining it on the launch pad. It's not there, but if I imagine it, it'll happen. Like sometimes I wonder, is this was this just a delusion? Or was there we're on the launch pad, but I definitely know we're not.
I think for Tommy it was a delusion, but the people around him, like Nick and Phil, they must have, unless they're secret heads as well, they must have known that was bull. and so for them, I think it was closer to lying and scamming. For Tommy, you're probably right, it's delusion. And it's funny, I found this thing today. I think you'll enjoy this. This is written by someone who used to follow The Secret, and he built a software company using the tenets of The Secret, much like Tommy. And the parallels are just uncanny with the Amico. I'll read you a couple of lines. This guy said, "We successfully raised the investment we were seeking and built a product. We were good at marketing and projecting an outward image of success. We got good press, lots of great feedback about our vision. I started to drink the Kool-Aid. I believed what everyone was saying about me." So far, this is Tommy could have written this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet problems started to appear in the product we had built. Users encountered bugs. We were running out of money. I kept on trying to visualize success. Self-doubt creeped in and I pushed it aside, trying to meditate harder, visualize better. I was overlooking a whole range of signals that I should have been focusing on. Any thoughts questioning my behavior would be pushed aside. I would simply focus on my next creative visualization session. It's Tommy to a T. But then, of course, it failed. His company failed. He said, "I didn't realize at the time, but my delusional positive thinking was stopping me from seeing warning signs in my life. I should have recognized earlier that the business was in trouble." And that's the point where Tommy's at now.
So let's see. Mr. T-Bone says Tommy may have been delusional initially, but there's no way John Alvarado, Phil Adam, and Nick Richards would have told him, "We don't have the numbers or the money or the tech or the time." They may have said that, and he may have been like, just wait and see. It'll work. I don't know. I don't know, because if you're that entrenched in this, that's your attitude, right? It doesn't matter what I see. It just matters what I believe. Yeah. And by the way, I'm all about being positive and having a positive outlook and saying, I'm all about that. I'm about like going into projects thinking you're going to succeed. Right. But I'm also about like, if a problem comes up, not ignoring it.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too. I don't know if I've said this online before, but I'll say they did The Secret wrong too, because I think Tommy talked about haters early on. They're just a bunch of haters. They're just out to kill the company. Well, if you can talk the positive into being, are you creating the negative into being?
You're right. The Secret teaches that as well, doesn't it? They say the only reason people catch cancer is because they think they'll get cancer, something like that. They think the negative into being.
I thought about doing a video on The Secret and Tommy. Maybe someday I will. I don't know. I find it fascinating, but I'm like, did you just create the haters by the power of The Secret? Like there's these people and their only goal is to destroy the company. It's like, listen, I'm not out to destroy a company. I don't think you are either. But I do think that there's people out there who would like nothing more just to see everything burn.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating to me. It's a case study of different philosophies and approaching it. And I have heard thoughts of like, well, maybe it's a Nick Richards. Maybe it's someone else in the office who's pulling the strings, who's more guilty of the scam, and Tommy's the scapegoat. Like they misuse Tommy and his just, positivity and whatever. I don't know. It's all speculation, but the end of the story is this: they made a bunch of promises they couldn't keep, or they didn't keep. And I don't know why people are still holding on. And like, I've seen, I saw a video or a post on Reddit or something about how, they have a Facebook group and it's all positive. Like it's been like, the number one rule is like, you be positive. Like this is for fun. And, you can be positive, but look at complaints. Like if you're driving down the road and you hear a tire pop and the car starts shaking, it's not negative to me to say, hey, I think we have a problem. Let's focus on how we can fix this problem in a positive solution. Okay. But but you see all this infighting starting now over there. And I wonder if some of this is like the secret stuff rubbing off, where some of these people are like, you can't say anything negative. You're not allowed to. So I don't know. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I think you're spot on. I called it malignant positivity, where they're doing a disservice to the company by pretending everything's okay. It doesn't help, yeah, because objectively things were not okay. And you can't just power through that sometimes. And it's fine to criticize it. It's needed. Like, for example, when I just did this playtest on Steam, if I had only gotten 100% positive responses, it'd be useless to me. What's the point? I wanted some, not negative, but I wanted criticisms. I wanted, ideas, things that could be done better, things that weren't working. You need that as a company.
Yeah, you need to be open to critiques, right? Not mean-spirited criticism necessarily, even though sometimes people can say things mean-spirited, but there's truth to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I've seen this just as a content creator. I've had my fair share of critics, and some of them are just mean. And when they're mean, you don't want to hear them, right? It's like,
Right.
you have to, that's another layer for you to personally get through in order to hear what they have to say. But there are people who've had good critiques. And I think good people will listen to that, or people who are really doing this. Let's see. Mr. T-Bone says, let's see, it's not a legal defense, that he just believed willful ignorance is the same as lying. I think you could say that. I mean, there is definitely potential that someone could prosecute, anyone can sue anybody, right? Whether they're successful or not, and whether the court hears this is another case. Could a lawsuit be made against Tommy Tellerico and the people at Amico for what they did? Do you think a legitimate lawsuit could be made that would actually get heard?
Unfortunately, I don't know enough about the American legal system. Here, I've been through a similar situation. It wasn't me personally, but I was a witness to a case, and I kind of helped out on the defense. Eventually, our side won. It went all the way to the Australian Supreme Court, became legal precedents. But anyway, there was a question in that of whether you could sue the proprietor behind the company. And they call it piercing the veil, piercing the corporate veil. And very, very difficult in general, right? The only ways we could do it here was if you could prove the company was operating insolvent and they were still incurring debt while technically insolvent. So I don't know if that's the case in America, though. So I would say there's very little, from what I understand, chance that you could get them personally on anything.
But in television entertainment, you could theoretically sue.
Theoretically, look, they did tell some lies in their fundraising, but they have to kind of be material misrepresentations, and you have to prove that you relied on those to make your decision of investment. So it's a pretty high burden that you've got to pass there.
Not just that, but is there any money to get out of it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You got to weigh that up.
And that's what I think. There are some people like, oh, I want to see these guys are going to court or whatever. And the thing is like, first of all, there's no money to sue for, I don't believe. And second of all, you got some, we may have seen it following the stuff, and you might, and a lot of people just get a sense like, oh, they're guilty, it's a scam. But to prove it in a court is another case altogether. You do have to jump through some legal, legal things to get there. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just telling my 2 cents, speculating that I think it would be, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to prove the case, and there's not a lot of reward if you win.
So, no, and who's out of pocket? So the only, it's tough to say that there's nobody really with a big out of pocket, because the money they got was mostly through small investors, through FIG, giving $1,000 to $10,000. No one's going to go to that trouble to get $1,000 back, because it's going to cost them way more than that to do. And even if they win and their lawyer fees get paid, they'll never be paid because there's no money. So it's pointless doing it. They have, the only big investors they had was Sudesh. He put like $1 million in. And there's one other investor or group of investors. There's about 1.4 million that I can't account for from the documents of investment that was made. Potentially that person may have some kind of case, but I doubt it, because at that point it was before the public fundraising, and it was early in the company where these things wouldn't have been verifiable lies. Back then you could say, well, they were plans and aspirations, not lies. Whereas Start Engine, if they had succeeded in Start Engine and got the money, there would have been some really strong cases there, I think. They had blatant lies in their advertising there, saying that they had patents awarded. Some of the ridiculous claims that they made. So I think they were lucky that they didn't get that.
So let's see. Vaporware says, "What about small claims court?" So like, I'll just answer this, and you can add in anything if you want. Like Judge Judy. Well, to do a TV show, that would totally be hilarious if something
I
like
would
that
pay
happened.
so much money to
Oh,
have Tommy and Judge Judy face off.
Of course, in those kind of situations, both parties have to agree to do it, and then they get paid to appear, and I think the payment can do whatever. So the small claims court, like if you had $100 refund, you did $100 pre-order and never got your system and you wanted the money back, I think you would have to do it like in their county, like where they're located, which would make it very burdensome, because then you have to travel there to do it. And I don't know the full extent. There was a situation where I was possibly going to go to small claims court and didn't do it, but you had to pay a fee. So even though for the $100, you're still going to pay what, 20, 30, $40 just for them to hear the case. And then you have to be in their county to do it. So I don't think that's likely. And I don't know if there's a difference when it comes to like a corporation or whatever, because this was going to be person versus person. You have anything to add to that?
No, I think you're right there. And for the FIG investors, you've got a real trouble here, because there's so many kind of intertwined parties. Who do you sue? Like, the investors didn't invest in Intellivision; they invested in FIG. The Palm Beach group, they're not Intellivision. They told a lot of the lies. So who do you sue? Do you sue Palm Beach? Do you sue FIG? Do you sue Intellivision? And each of those parties is going to blame the other parties. Where's that nexus where you have a case? I don't know.
And then Mr. T-Bone brought up the SEC. I'm like, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think I think the government has bigger fish to fry, to be honest. I could be wrong, but I don't think I don't think there's there's a lot of stuff that bothers me. Like how they had an investor show up in their Crayola event video, and they never said and admitted to it or put any disclaimer in their video. That bothered me a lot. And what they told their, the people that they were getting money from. But I don't think, let's be honest. There's a small group of us who are really fascinated by the story. Most of the world could care less.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't think it's going to hit anything. I think let me, I'll say, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, because we'll probably end soon. Thank you for being on so long. I didn't know we'd go over an hour. But it was fun talking to you, man.
Yeah, likewise.
Let me ask you this. Let's if anyone wants to ask a question, they can ask it, and if it's fitting, I'll put it up. But what is your prediction that's going to happen with this Intellivision Amico thing?
I do think they were going to get a handful of units out to influencers. I can see that happening. I'm surprised I haven't done it yet. In fact, the longer it goes on, the less likely I guess it would be, because we're getting on almost 6 weeks, aren't we, from when Phil Adams sent out his update? So
yeah, I think it's right in that you'll hear more soon, and that was over a month ago.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that update was lies. They're not. I doubt they're doing full test production runs with a manufacturer. I don't know. It sounds unlikely to me. And if they were doing that, why wouldn't they provide details? All the companies, the little companies, they all do it. They show photos of the units coming off the line. They say where it's being done. They take a video of them going over there to supervise it and so on. It just seems really strange that they wouldn't be showing that kind of thing. So I think the units are really them putting it together in the back room. See, okay, here's how I'd like to sum it up. We're all focused on the small part of it. We're focused on, will they get some units out? And you need to take a step back, because there's a bigger thing behind that, which is, can this system realistically survive more than, I don't know, a month after they release it? Because the short answer is no. They have 5,000 pre-orders. They're not getting any more pre-orders, even when they're free pre-orders. This is all they've had for 2 years now. Where is the demand for this product? They're never going to sell any. And if they were going to sell any, it's now $340 for the system. To sell units at that price, they would need to spend so much money in advertising to A, have people even hear about it in the first place, and B, convince them to spend so much money. Where are they going to get that? In the SEC filing, they said after they raise the next 10 million, which they've got zero of, after that, they need an additional 25 to 35 million to be able to sell this console like properly. This is after the pre-orders, right? To actually have a retail unit. Another 25 to 35 million. They say it in the filing. Where is that going to come from? There's absolutely zero chance. And without that, they're dead. They may get even 5,000 units out. That's the end of it. They'll never make another game because there's no money to do that. They're never going to sell another console because there's no money for marketing. There is effectively 0% chance that this console will survive. So it's irrelevant if they get a handful of units out. It's going to be the worst performing console in history. It simply will be.
Here's another interesting question. If they did produce any units, would the back-end system be done? Would they just have the games built in? Could you actually use the physical games?
I think they can get around that. I think they can either have an incredibly cut down system. What they could do, I mean, it wouldn't take much to do this. Preload all of the box games on there, but lock them, and then have the NEC just unlock the game. That's all it needs to do. So their backend server is receive that link from the NFC, send a code back to the Amico that's just a 0 changing to a 1, and that game's now unlocked. Don't need to download it, so you don't need the full AWS servers. That's it. So they could do that. So yeah, I think there's ways around. They could launch it, but then that's the end of it. There's going to be no support. There's going to be no additional functionality. There won't be a store. You won't be able to buy more games. They won't make any more games.
Do you think the games are actually done?
Look, John Alvarado himself said they weren't. Well, by saying some of them haven't even entered the final QA stage, that means they're not done. I know very, very well that there could still be weeks and weeks of work from that point on. You'll be very lucky if you pass that QA with flying color.
Let me ask you this, because I have a theory, and I want to shoot it by you because you're smarter than me in this area. You have experience. My theory is this, and I've heard someone else say something about this, so I won't take full credit, but my theory is this. There's problems with the controller working with the system. So Joe Schmo programs a game, but for the system, but they're using the phone app or whatever. But when the actual controller gets involved, there's some problems going on. There's lag, or there's some processing problems. It's not up to snuff. And so they had these games that are finished, but they have these games that were quote unquote finished, but the final QA check with the actual controller is problematic and they can't get around it, or they're having a hard time. Do you think that theory holds water?
I'll tell you a little story. The Switch port of my game, they had to do a lot of those things. They had to turn shadows off, for example. I hadn't optimized the game very much because I just didn't need to. On PC, it ran on low-end PCs really easily. But for Switch, couldn't handle some of those things. So they had to turn shadows off, for example. And then when I got to test the final version of the game, and this was a few days, this is why it got delayed an extra couple of weeks right at the end for Switch. I get the final version to test on the Switch. You could walk through walls in this version. Never happened before in any of the other versions. You could walk through walls. Crazy. A few days before release. So we had to just rapidly hit pause, and I worked with the porting guys to work it out. It turned out they updated the version of Unity, and there was a new setting on the physics parameters, and it defaulted to a velocity setting that was not compatible with my game. So all we had to do was literally change one number in the setting, and everything was fine. But it's just an example of the kind of thing that can happen in that final QA, and particularly like you were saying, once you get on the actual hardware, you just don't know what's going to be different. And clearly, developers were seeing that. You saw it in the Bomb Squad video. The Backtalk Party guy talked about it, how he was getting constant firmware updates, and then they would find a new issue on the hardware. They'd have to wait a few weeks, get another firmware update, and round it goes.
So you're saying, yes, there could be problems with the controller being brought into the mix.
Oh, not just the controller, the system itself. So while it's all outputting from Unity to Android, that's not always the picture, the full picture. So, for example, RAM. The Amico only has 2 gigabytes of RAM, and you may, let's say you were testing internally on hardware and simulating 2 gigs of RAM. You think everything's good. Send it to that Amico. Phil Adams said they had to still do more work during Start Engine. He said this. They still had to continue optimizing the footprint of the system so that larger games could run. That tells me that they had some kind of memory issue where of those 2 gig, a big portion of it was being used by the operating system. So there wasn't really 2 gig free for the developer to use. And that's why they can't run probably games like Cloudy Mountain and stuff on the Amico. Phil Adams used the example of Toe Jam and Earl. Toe Jam and Earl is not an intensive game, but he said that would not run on the Amico unless they optimized the footprint further. So yeah, it may not be only the controller, it may be also the operating system. And if you look through the resumes of people who have left Intellivision and some who are still there, they talk a lot about optimizing the system when they describe the work they did in Intellivision. Lots of very minute things, saving bits and scraps of RAM here and there so that they can get things displayed on the controller or transferred between them and so on. Clearly it was a problem, and whether they've solved it, who knows. They probably got it to a state where a number of games can run, but a lot of these games that disappeared, like Cloudy Mountain, I wouldn't be surprised if that's why.
It just can't handle it. Doesn't have enough gas in the tank.
Yeah.
What do you think happened with Cornhole? And I ask you this, I don't know if you saw it. I think you did, but I did a video of the unboxing where I noticed, and I think someone else pointed out, I'm sorry that I forget who, because I just read like the Reddits and whatever, and it pops out. But Cornhole looked worse in their unboxing video. Why do you think Cornhole took a graphical downgrade?
Definitely optimization. The ones that they removed were clearly higher geometry, higher resolution textures. These are all things that take up RAM, particularly the textures. So yeah, obviously they were running into limits on the real hardware, which lends credence to the theory that a lot of what we saw previously was souped up hardware. It wasn't final production hardware. It either had double the amount of RAM, or it had different chips, or it was a Raspberry Pi 4 or something in those shells that was not final production hardware, because they were running Cornhole in the old, the higher resolution version earlier. But when it gets to the real thing, clearly they had to downgrade it.
Which,
And I would say,
if you have to downgrade Cornhole,
yeah. Well, you know what? To be fair, and I know Mike Garcia, for example, always rags on Unity for this. Unity's fairly bloated. It's things that you think are fairly simple sometimes are not. They're resource hogs, even though they seem pretty simple. But
so
Cornhole is an example that you would think could run that easily.
well, because there's other games that look more deep, right? They look like they're doing more, but what you're saying is maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe all the math that goes into Cornhole, throwing the beanbag and calculating the arc and all that other stuff might be
No.
taking up more.
Unless they're programming it really badly, none of that should put any kind of strain.
Because Cornhole it looks like a simple game. It looks like a game that could be part of them. I mean, on the Wii, it was part of a multi-game, right? They had Cornhole on one of those. It was just
for sure.
So for Cornhole, a standalone game to have to go be downgraded just blows my mind. It does.
It's possible that the assets they were using in the older version were
stolen. I didn't say that.
I mean, they're probably licensed, but they probably were not suitable for that kind of game or that hardware. And it'll happen. Like back when I was doing the military games, now and then you would get a model, and it was okay. It would have millions of polygons, where really it should have had a couple of thousand to be game ready, and it would have millions of polygons. Clearly wasn't suitable, and you throw that in the game and it crawls to a halt. So perhaps some of the assets they were using were just completely incorrect for what they were trying to do.
Sorry, I had to block. Had somebody show up at that. I had to remove from the chat. So anyways, I'll say this. I'll say that my theory of what will happen. And by the way, I never wished ill on the project. I just didn't like the lies. I didn't like that they were taking investors' money. I'm sure there were some people who were working behind the scenes who are good people, like they went to do an honest job, because they did have 50 to 60 employees, right? I mean, that seems pretty. And some of those were just consultants, but they had people who were going to work every day and they were trying to build something, and they don't want a blemish on their career. They didn't sign up. It wasn't like, hey, you want to join the scam? They thought that they were going to be part of the system. And so I do feel for some of those people who lost their job. I know some of them lost it at inopportune times from some of the things I've seen. But so I didn't wish ill on the system, and I actually wanted it to come out so we could see what it was finally like. But my theory is this, my prediction is they've lost so much money. There's no incentive to really build and send out units. Like, they're going to see the writings on the wall. So I have a feeling that I don't know how much longer they can go, but I'll say by September, let's say by October, what was it? 10/10/2/20 by 10/10 by 10/10/2/22. By 10/10/22, it'll be over. They'll just go out of business. No one will get anything. Maybe some of the games will be sold, but I'm like, you've seen the games. Do you think a publisher would be eager to pick up these games and bring them over to the Switch and put the time and resources into it? Or do you think most publishers are like, yeah, it's not worth our time and money to optimize these for something else?
No, look, there are shovelware publishers for sure. And look, I'm not saying all the games are shovelware. I don't want to be unfair. Some of them are probably fine games, but there are publishers who work on volume and not quality, who, they would pump them out, and they don't care if that makes $500. It doesn't matter. It doesn't cost them anything. But if you're talking about real publishers, no, not at all.
Right.
But they wouldn't need to. They should publish it themselves. They would need to port them over. not a massive challenge. It's mainly stripping out the controls. Like I saw John Alvarado say, the games wouldn't work without the controllers. That's hogwash. Nearly all of those games take no advantage of the controllers whatsoever. The minimal functionality that you could strip out and no one would ever miss. Shark, being able to see the little bonus on the screen, irrelevant. You could just have the controller rumble. You don't need that kind of thing. So they could do it probably, I don't know, a week or so on each game, something like that. If you're lucky, if you're unlucky, a month. So it could be done, but if you saw, I did a little analysis on for Steam releasing the Amico games, comparing it to similar games that are on there, and it paints a very bleak picture. The upshot is they would be lucky to make back the porting costs on those games. And best chance they might make a couple of $100,000 or something like that, which is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, it's sad, but I just don't see the money. I don't see the money to do it. I don't see any investors, angel investors. I could be wrong. Prove me wrong in television. I've said it before. I don't see it happening. I think this is going to slowly die. They may not even say anything.
Well, here's the thing. They've been trying to get an investor for like 3 years now and failed. Like since Sudesh, they pretty much have had no other investor come on board. So we're talking about when it was in its prime, at its time of most opportunity, they couldn't get an investor. Why do you think they would get an investor now after they're teetering on bankruptcy, absolutely failed in Start Engine, can't even get free pre-orders, had their biggest distributor drop them, their biggest game license is gone, Earthworm Jim. They're in the worst position possible, and now they're suddenly going to get a big investor. Does not compute.
Yeah, so Slider asked about Earthworm Jim. They removed a bunch of the videos from their YouTube page. It looks like they no longer have the rights. We don't know exactly why. I've heard rumors like it's possible the license ran out. It's also possible that the original developer Interplay said, "Yeah, you guys aren't doing that anymore." Because you talked about how it's possible, like with your scripts in Hollywood, how you can have like a deal in place where they have the rights, no one else can get the rights, but you can basically back out of it.
Yeah.
So you think that's possible with some of these games they announced where they made a deal, or maybe even a two-way thing where like it wasn't 100% for sure, but they had the rights to do it, but people could back out if they wanted.
Oh, definitely. I'd say most of them would have get out clauses like that.
Yeah. So I think I think it's possible it goes, and you don't even hear Phil Adam give an announcement. It goes. I don't know.
May already be gone.
They might. I mean, all we have right now is a PO box in a UPS store, and no one talking on a regular basis. So yeah, it could. I hope they would do it right. I hope they would give all the thing. Oh, here's Ninja Kitty. We can end with this. When will Gatoroos, that elusive hater hole game in the hater collection? Let me ask you, were you planning to do any other hater games that you never got to?
Look, I'm not going to have a day free for the next several months. Just between I'm doing a big move and the new game I'm working on. I can't see myself even getting a day free. And the second issue is, what game would I do? Like hater hole, it's just boring to me. Like, there's not much interesting you could do, and it's not going to be fun to play. I'm kind of interested in doing, someone mentioned before, a Night Stalker kind of game, but it's pretty much the game already made, Ampersat. It's very similar to that. So it's not that interesting, for me to do. I'd probably maybe Biplanes is somewhat interesting, and I could probably do that in a day. So yeah, short answer is don't expect another hater game in the short period, but we'll see. I'm not ruling it out long term.
You probably can do this. You probably can't do this for hater hole, cornhole, right? You probably, I don't think you could do this, but could you imagine if each of the cornhole boards were like, Tommy's face or John's face or something like that? And like when you threw, so the haters are the beanbags, right? So, so Ninja Kitty's the beanbag, and you throw the Ninja Kitty beanbag, and if it goes to the hole, like the Tommy face, like chews it up and goes, ha ha ha, or eats it up. Like it's like this living cornhole board that eats the haters. Like take that or whatever,
That would be
it,
kind of cool.
or like you throw it and it hits his eye and he's like, oh, you hit my eye, something like that. Like that would be hilarious.
I would surely get legal incoming from that.
Yeah. Too bad. So
basically, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? Yep, wouldn't that be something? Well, I want to thank Gaterooz. Is there anything you wanted to say or plug before we call it a night?
Just wrapping up on Amico, they do have loans coming due at the end of this year. Don't know exactly how much. It's a tranche of like 1.4 million, I think 1.6 million. But
who's it to?
They don't say it's potentially more than one person, but this is debt that they borrowed, convertible notes, and there's a number of them, and they start maturing between end of this year and 2024. They don't say how much per year, but some of them will be due end of this year. So I think that's going to put a clock on things.
Okay, so you're what you're basically saying is that debt means by the end of the year is make it or break it.
Yeah,
like they're not here in 2023 unless a financial miracle happens.
I think so. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Gatoroos. Thank you all to the chat for watching. I appreciate it. It's been a really calm chat, which is a cool thing in the Amico sphere. Mm-hmm. Hope you guys enjoyed this stream. Check out Ampersat over on Steam. You can demo it, or you can get the Switch and look for a crossover at some point in the near future. And Gatoroos, if you want to put a link to all the to the hater games and the link of in the chat sometime later, I didn't do that.
Sure.
That would be awesome as well. So thank you, Gatoroos. Thank you, chat. We will see you next time.
Thank you.